Welcome to the longest February of my life. I moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas 2 years ago because the tech sector here was booming, and I landed a contract as a regional field technician, which meant I was always on the road fixing equipment, chasing deadlines, and living out of hotel rooms half the month. Brookhaven is a gated master-planned community with strict rules and private security patrols. The kind of place where every mailbox looks identical and the landscaping committee sends you a letter if your shrubs are 2 inches too tall. I bought in because I needed a stable address for work correspondence, and the HOA promised low drama and high property values. What they did not promise was that Caitlin Green, the finance committee lead everyone called Janet behind her back, would turn a small propane tank for a patio heater into a legal nightmare that nearly cost me my biggest contract and forced me to choose between family and my home. The trouble started on a Saturday morning in early February when I opened my front door to grab the newspaper and found a bright yellow violation notice taped to the doorframe. The notice claimed that the small black propane cylinder I kept on my back patio for a portable heater was a fire hazard and prohibited under community covenants. I had used that heater exactly twice during ice storms when the power went out, and the tank was stored upright on a metal stand away from the house. The notice gave me 72 hours to remove the tank or face a $250 fine, and it was signed by Janet Green on behalf of the Brookhaven Homeowners Association. I called the management company that Monday and got voicemail. I emailed a polite explanation with photos showing the tank was stored safely and cited the Arkansas Fire Code that explicitly allows propane cylinders up to 20 pounds on residential patios. No response. I called again Tuesday and was told Janet would review my appeal and get back to me. She never did. Wednesday afternoon, I was 2 states away installing a new server rack when my phone buzzed with a follow-up notice. This one said that because I had not removed the tank, the fine was now active and any future guests parking in my driveway would be cited or towed. That escalation made no sense. The original violation was about the propane tank, not guest parking. I sent another email pointing out the disconnect and asking for a hearing date. The management company replied 2 days later saying my file was under review and I should expect a response within 10 business days. 10 business days would put me past the deadline to leave for my mother's surgery in Michigan, and the weather forecast was already showing a winter storm system moving in that could shut down flights for a week. I did not have 10 days. I had to resolve this now or risk missing the surgery, missing my contract deadlines, and paying fines for a tank I was legally allowed to own. That Friday, I showed up at the HOA office during their posted walk-in hours. The office was a converted unit in the clubhouse building, and the door was locked with a handwritten note saying the manager was out for the day. I waited in my truck for 20 minutes in case someone showed up, then drove home and found another notice on my door. This one claimed I had damaged the common area concrete sidewalk by using too much salt and demanded reimbursement for resurfacing costs. The sidewalk in question was in front of my driveway, and I had salted it once during the ice storm to prevent slips. Every other homeowner had done the same thing. The notice included a line-item breakdown with no receipts and a total of $800. The notice was signed by Janet again, and it had a handwritten addendum saying that failure to pay within 7 days would result in a lien filing. I called a buddy who worked in city planning and asked if the HOA could fine me for salt damage on a common sidewalk. He laughed and said no, that was a maintenance issue the HOA budget was supposed to cover, and if they wanted to claim negligence, they would need a third-party assessment and proof of damage beyond normal wear. He also told me that Arkansas state law prohibits HOAs from enforcing restrictions that conflict with local fire safety codes, and propane tanks under 20 pounds are explicitly allowed by Fayetteville City Ordinance. He offered to send me the ordinance citation in an email. I told him yes, send it now, because I was going to need proof, and I was going to need it fast. That night I printed the ordinance and the email from my city contact and highlighted the relevant sections. I also printed the photos I had sent to the management company showing the propane tank stored safely. I put everything in a folder and planned to hand-deliver it to the HOA office Monday morning before my flight to Michigan. Then I got a text from my neighbor across the street, a contractor named Derek who had helped me move in and who had seen Janet poking around my driveway earlier that week. He sent me a photo he had taken from his window showing Janet standing on my patio with a clipboard and a cheap orange plastic measuring tape, measuring the width of the path I had shoveled in front of my garage. The timestamp was from Tuesday afternoon, the same day I had sent my first appeal email. Derek said she had spent about 10 minutes measuring and taking notes, then left without knocking on my door or leaving any paperwork. I saved the photo and thanked him. I did not know what Janet was planning, but I knew it was not good. Monday morning, I went to the HOA office at 8 sharp. The door was unlocked this time, and the manager was there, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Linda. I handed her the folder and explained the situation calmly. Linda scanned the ordinance and nodded. She said she would forward it to the board and that the fines should be canceled within a week. I asked if I could get that in writing. She said she would send an email confirmation by end of day. I thanked her and left feeling like maybe this was finally over. I was wrong. That afternoon, I got an email from a law firm in Little Rock with a letterhead I had never seen before. The email said the firm represented the Brookhaven Homeowners Association and that I was in violation of multiple covenants, including unauthorized outdoor appliances, improper guest parking, and destruction of common property. It demanded immediate payment of $1,050 in fines and reimbursement costs, plus $200 in attorney fees, or the HOA would file a lien and pursue collections. The letter was full of bluff language about court costs and property seizure, but the signature line was real and the firm existed. I looked them up and found a single attorney practice that specialized in debt collection, not HOA law. This was a scare tactic, and it was working. I called Linda and asked why I was getting attorney letters when she had promised to cancel the fines. She stammered and said the board had overruled her and instructed her to escalate the case. I asked who on the board made that call. She said she could not disclose internal deliberations, but that Janet Green had prepared the summary and the board voted to proceed. I asked if I could attend the next board meeting to present my evidence in person. Linda said the next meeting was not until March 15th, more than a month away, and that I could not attend unless I submitted a written request at least 14 days in advance. I told her I would be out of state caring for family and asked if I could send my evidence packet by email for the board to review in advance. She said she would check and let me know. She never did. That week, the winter storm hit and flights out of Little Rock were delayed 2 days. I rebooked through Memphis and spent an extra $600 I did not have. My mother's surgery went fine, but recovery was slow, and I ended up staying in Michigan for 10 days instead of 5. The whole time I was getting emails from the management company asking for payment and reminding me that the lien deadline was approaching. I replied every time with the city ordinance and the contractor photos from Derek, and every time I got a form response saying my file was under review. On the 5th day, I got a text from Derek with another photo. This one showed Janet back at my house with the measuring tape again, this time crouched next to the propane tank with a notebook. Derek said she had shown up with a security patrol truck and spent 15 minutes documenting everything. He said she told the guard that I was a problem resident who refused to follow the rules and that the board was considering revoking my gate access until I paid. I called Linda immediately and left a voicemail asking if that was true. She did not call back. When I got home from Michigan, the first thing I did was check my patio. The propane tank was still there, exactly where I had left it. The second thing I did was check my mail. There were 3 more notices from the HOA, all identical copies of the attorney letter, and a new bright yellow slip taped to my garage door warning that my access code to the neighborhood gate would be suspended within 48 hours if I did not contact the office to arrange payment. I drove straight to the clubhouse. Linda was not there, but Janet was. She was sitting at Linda's desk with a stack of files and that same cheap orange measuring tape coiled next to her keyboard. She looked up when I walked in and smiled like she had been expecting me. "I need to talk to Linda," I said. "Linda is not here today," Janet said. She leaned back in the chair and folded her arms. "But I can help you. You are here about the fines." "I am here about the harassment," I said. "I have sent the city ordinance 3 times. The propane tank is legal. The salt claim is bogus. I want the fines canceled, and I want my gate access left alone." Janet shook her head slowly. "I have been on this board for years. I know what I am doing. The covenants are clear. Outdoor appliances require written approval, and you never applied. The salt damage is documented. You can pay now or you can wait for the lien, but either way you are going to pay." I pulled out my folder and set it on the desk. I have the fire code right here, I said. And I have photos from a witness showing you trespassing on my property to measure things that are none of your business. Janet did not even look at the folder. She picked up the measuring tape and turned it over in her hands like it was evidence in a trial. Trespassing, she said. That is rich. I was conducting a site inspection as authorized by the covenants. And as for your little photos, I can make sure you never get a fair hearing if you keep threatening me. I stared at her. That line, the threat about never getting a fair hearing, it landed like a punch. She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather, but the intent was crystal clear. She was telling me she controlled the process, and I had no recourse. I did not chase her accusations right then, because I already had the receipts. What she did not know was that I had been recording every interaction on my phone since the first attorney letter arrived, and I had a 90-second video clip from the previous week when she showed up at my door while I was still in Michigan, and my neighbor let her into the backyard to inspect the tank. Derek had filmed the whole thing from his window, and in the video, Janet was shouting at my back fence about code violations and telling Derek that I was going to regret making her job difficult. The clip was clear, the audio was clean, and it was time-stamped. But I was not ready to show it yet. I needed the right moment, and I needed an audience. I left the office without another word and went home to regroup. That night, I got an email from the management company saying my gate access code had been suspended effective immediately due to non-payment of outstanding fines. The email said I could request a temporary code by calling the security office, but each temporary code would expire after 24 hours, and I would need to renew it daily until the fines were resolved. This was insane. I called the security office and got a board guard who said he could issue me a code for tonight, but I would have to call back tomorrow. I asked if there was an appeal process. He said I would have to talk to the board. I asked when the next board meeting was. He said March 15th, same answer Linda had given me. I hung up and stared at my calendar. March 15th was 4 weeks away. My next contract site visit was in 2 weeks. My mother might need me back in Michigan at any time. I could not live on temporary gate codes for a month while Janet played games with my file. I spent the next 2 days digging through every email, every notice, and every piece of documentation I had. I found 3 separate inconsistencies in the dates and the fine amounts. The original notice said $250. The attorney letter said $1,050. The gate suspension email referenced a different amount entirely, $600, with no explanation of how they calculated it. I also found a clause in the covenants that said the HOA had to provide written notice of any fine at least 30 days before enforcement action, and the timeline from first notice to gate suspension was only 12 days. I drafted a formal appeal and attached the city ordinance, the timeline breakdown, the inconsistency summary, and the contractor photos from Derek. I sent it to Linda, Janet, and every board member email I could find in the community directory. The next morning, I got a reply from Janet. Not from the management company, not from Linda, but directly from Janet's personal email. The message was 2 sentences. It said, "Your appeal is denied. If you continue to waste the board's time with frivolous complaints, we will consider additional enforcement action." I read it 3 times. There was no reference to the ordinance, no acknowledgement of the timeline issues, no explanation of the fine calculation, just a flat denial and a threat. I forwarded the email to my city contact and asked if he had any advice. He said the HOA was clearly stonewalling me and that my best bet was to show up at the next board meeting with witnesses and documentation, but that in the meantime, I should also file a complaint with the Arkansas Real Estate Commission because using a management company to stonewall and lose paperwork repeatedly was a violation of state property management standards. I filed the complaint that afternoon. The following week, I was back on the road for work, this time in Oklahoma City, and I got a call from Derek. He said Janet had been at my house again, this time with a security guard and a digital camera, taking more photos of the propane tank in the sidewalk. He said she spent almost half an hour walking around my yard, and that she had asked him if he had given me any photos. Derek told her no, which was technically true because he had texted them, not handed them over. Janet told him that interfering with an HOA investigation was a covenant violation and that he should be careful. Derek is the kind of guy who does not scare easy, but he sounded rattled. He said Janet was escalating and that I needed to be ready for something big. I thanked him and told him to document everything, keep his distance, and not engage with her unless he had a witness. Then I called Linda again. This time she answered. "I need to know what is going on," I said. "I have filed an appeal, I have provided city documentation, and now I am getting threats about additional enforcement." "What is Janet doing?" Linda sighed. She sounded exhausted. "Look," she said, "I am just the manager. The board sets policy. Janet is the finance lead and she has a lot of influence. If she says a fine stands, the board usually backs her." "Even when the fine is illegal," I said. "I did not say illegal," Linda said quickly. "I said the board backs her. If you want to challenge it, you need to come to the meeting in March." "I will be out of state in March," I said. "I already told you that. And your own covenants say I can submit evidence in writing." Linda paused. "You can submit it," she said, "but there is no guarantee the board will read it before the meeting. Janet usually prepares the agenda and the summary packets. If your file is not in the packet, the board will not see it." That confirmed what I already suspected. Janet was gatekeeping the information flow and the management company was letting her do it. I asked Linda point blank if she had received my appeal email. She said yes. I asked if she had forwarded it to the board. She said she forwarded everything to Janet for review. I asked if Janet had added it to the agenda. Linda said she did not know. I asked if I could send my evidence directly to the other board members. Linda said I could try, but she could not give me their personal emails because of privacy rules. I thanked her and hung up. I went back to the community directory and started cold emailing every address that looked like it might belong to a board member. I got 3 bouncebacks and 1 autoresponder. No human replies. I was running out of time and options. My flight to Michigan was in 6 days. My contract deadline was in 10. And Janet was tightening the screws. The next day was Saturday, and I decided to go to the clubhouse pool deck to clear my head. The pool was closed for winter, but the deck area was supposed to remain accessible for residents who wanted to walk the perimeter or use the benches. When I got there, the gate to the pool deck was locked, and there was a new sign zip-tied to the fence saying the area was closed until further notice due to safety concerns. I pulled out my phone and called the clubhouse number. Janet answered. I asked why the pool deck was closed. She said it was a board decision based on liability and that residents had been notified by email. I told her I never got an email. She said that was not her problem and that I should check my spam folder. I asked when the deck would reopen. She said it depended on weather and budget and that residents who caused extra work for the board should not expect special accommodations. Then she hung up. I stood there in the cold staring at the locked gate and realized this was not about the propane tank anymore. This was about power. Janet had decided I was a problem, and she was going to make my life difficult until I either paid up or moved out. The pool deck closure was not a safety issue. It was a message. And the timing right before I had to leave town was not a coincidence. She was boxing me in. That night I got a group text from an unknown number. The text went out to about 30 residents, and it said, "Emergency snow removal notice. Brookhaven roads will be cleared Monday morning. All vehicles must be moved to designated overflow parking by 6 a.m. or they will be towed at owner expense. Overflow parking is behind the clubhouse. Failure to comply will result in fines." The text was signed Brookhaven HOA Board. I checked the weather forecast. There was no major snow event predicted for Monday. We had about 2 inches on the ground from the previous week, but the roads were already clear. I called Derek and asked if he got the text. He said yes, and he said half the neighborhood was confused because there was no snow emergency. I asked if he thought this was another Janet move. He said absolutely. He said the text made it look like I was the problem resident, because I was the only one who had been publicly fighting the fines, and if people started getting towed on Monday, they would blame me for triggering a crackdown. I needed to act fast. I forwarded the emergency text to my city contact and asked if the HOA had the authority to declare a snow emergency and tow vehicles without city coordination. He replied within an hour and said no, that Arkansas cities retain sole authority over emergency road clearing on public streets. And even on private subdivision streets, the HOA would need a formal agreement with the city and a declared emergency order from the county. He said the text looked like a bluff and that I should report it to the City Code Enforcement Office. He also said that if the HOA followed through and actually towed anyone, the city would step in and force them to stop illegal notices. That was exactly what I needed. I took a screenshot of his reply and added it to my evidence folder. Sunday night, I sent a mass email to every resident email I could scrape from the directory. I did not have all of them, maybe 40 addresses total, but it was enough. The email had the subject line, HOA snow emergency text is not authorized by city. I kept it short and factual. I explained that I had confirmed with the city that the HOA had no authority to declare a snow emergency or tow vehicles, and I attached the screenshot of the city reply. I said that if anyone received a tow notice, they should contact the City Code Enforcement Office and file a complaint. I did not mention Janet by name. I did not need to. Everyone knew who ran the finance committee and who had sent the text. Monday morning, I woke up to 17 replies. Some people thanked me. Some people said they had already moved their cars and were annoyed. 3 people said they were going to demand a special board meeting to address the text. And 1 reply came from Janet. It was short, you just made a big mistake. I saved it. That afternoon, I had to leave for a job site in Tulsa. I packed my truck and headed out around 2. When I got to the neighborhood entrance gate, I punched in my temporary code. The gate arm did not move. I tried again. Nothing. I called the security office and got the same guard from before. He said my code had been deactivated per management instructions and that I would need to contact Linda to get a new one. I said I had a temporary code that was supposed to work until tonight. He said he did not know anything about that and that he could not override the system without authorization. I asked if I could get a supervisor on the line. He said there was no supervisor on site and that I would have to call the office. I called Linda. Voicemail. I called the main HOA number. Voicemail. I called Janet's cell, which I had saved from a previous email signature. She answered on the first ring. Hello, she said. Her voice was bright and cheerful. My gate code is not working, I said. I need to get out for work. Oh, Janet said. That is unfortunate. You will need to contact the office and arrange a payment plan. Once the fines are paid, your access will be restored. I have a temporary code that was supposed to work until tonight, I said. Someone deactivated it early. I do not have access to the gate system, Janet said. You will have to take that up with security. Security said it was deactivated per management instructions, I said, and you are sitting in the management office right now. Janet laughed. I am volunteering today, she said. I do not make access decisions. But I can tell you that residents who send mass emails full of misinformation and who refuse to pay legitimate fines should not be surprised when they lose privileges. This is a private community. We have rules. If you do not like the rules, you can sell and move somewhere else. I will be filing a formal complaint, I said. Good luck with that, Janet said. I have been on this board for years. I know what I am doing. She hung up. I sat in my truck at the closed gate with the engine running and steam rising from the hood into the cold air. Behind me, I could see another car pulling up. If I did not move, they were going to block me in. I put the truck in reverse, backed up into the visitor lane, and called my client in Tulsa to explain I was going to be late. He was not happy. I told him I had an HOA emergency and I would be there by tonight. He said tonight was not good enough and that if I could not meet the deadline, he would find another technician. I asked for 2 hours. He said 1 hour or the contract was void. I agreed and hung up. I called Derek. I told him what happened and asked if he could meet me at the gate with his truck. He said he was already on his way. 10 minutes later, he pulled up behind me and we both got out in the cold. Derek said he had an idea. He said the HOA covenants allowed residents to sponsor guests with a temporary code and that he could sponsor me as his guest and give me his code for today. I said that sounded like a loophole that Janet would close immediately. Derek said probably, but it would get me out now and we could fight about it later. I agreed. He called the security office and requested a guest code for his contractor. The guard issued it and Derek texted it to me. I punched it in and the gate opened. I thanked Derek and promised I would buy him dinner when this was over. He said I should buy him a lawyer instead. I made it to Tulsa with 10 minutes to spare and finished the install by midnight. The client was satisfied, but he made it clear that he expected reliability and that one more delay would end the contract. I drove back to Fayetteville overnight and got home around 6 in the morning. When I pulled into my driveway, there was a bright orange sticker on my garage door. The sticker said, "Unauthorized use of guest access code. Violators will be reported to the board." I crumpled it and went inside. I was beyond exhausted. I slept for 4 hours and woke up to another email from the attorney. This one said the HOA was prepared to file a lien within 5 business days unless I contacted them to arrange payment. The tone was more aggressive. It referenced my mass email and said that spreading false information about HOA authority was defamatory and could result in additional legal action. I forwarded the email to my real estate commission complaint file and added a note about the threats. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was a woman who introduced herself as the president of the Brookhaven HOA board. Her name was Lisa, and she sounded nervous. She said she had received my appeal email and that she wanted to talk off the record. I said I was happy to talk, but I was going to record the call for my records. She hesitated, then agreed. I started recording. Lisa said, "I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how this has been handled. Janet has been pushing hard on your case, and she has been adding line items to the enforcement reports that some of us do not understand. We have asked her for documentation, and she says it is all in the file, but when we ask to see the file, she says it is with the attorney. So you are telling me the board is voting on fines without seeing the evidence," I said. "I am telling you that Janet controls the finance committee, and the finance committee controls the enforcement budget," Lisa said. "And right now we have a bigger problem. Our insurance carrier is threatening to cancel our liability policy because we have had 3 complaints filed against the HOA in the last 6 months, and one of them is your real estate commission complaint. If we lose our insurance, the whole community could be at risk of dissolution or forced sale. The board is terrified." "That is not my fault," I said. "I filed the complaint because the HOA is breaking the law." "I am not saying it is your fault," Lisa said. "I am saying we need to resolve this before it gets worse. If you drop the complaint and pay a reduced fine, I can get Janet to back off and restore your gate access." "I am not paying a fine for something that is legal," I said. "And I am not dropping a complaint that is legitimate. If the board is terrified, the board should remove Janet and fix the process." Lisa sighed. "I understand," she said. "But that is not going to happen before the insurance renewal deadline. We have 2 weeks. If we lose the policy, we are done." I told her I would think about it, and I ended the call. I did not need to think about it. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to go to the March meeting. I was going to bring Derek and every piece of evidence I had, and I was going to make Janet explain herself in front of the whole board. But first, I needed to survive the next 2 weeks without losing my contract, my gate access, or my sanity. The following Monday, I got another group text. This one said, "Reminder, all residents must maintain shoveled walkways to a minimum width of 36 inches per community safety standards. Violations will be cited." The text was signed by Janet. I went outside and measured my walkway with the same cheap orange measuring tape I had borrowed from Derek after seeing Janet use hers. My path was 38 inches. I took a photo with the tape in frame and texted it to Linda with a note saying my walkway was compliant and asking where the 36-inch rule was documented. Linda replied an hour later saying she would check the covenants and get back to me. She never did. 2 days later, I was in Springfield, Missouri finishing another install when Derek called. He said a tow truck had just pulled into my driveway and that Janet was there with a security guard. I told him to go over there and film everything. He said he was already filming from his window. I asked him to go outside and make sure they saw him. He said he would. I stayed on the line and listened. I could hear Derek walking across the street and then his voice calling out to Janet asking what was going on. Janet's voice came through the phone, loud and sharp. She said my truck was parked illegally and was being towed for blocking the common driveway apron. Derek said the truck was in my driveway, not on the apron. Janet said the apron extended 6 feet past the curb and my truck was over the line. Derek said that was not true and he had measurements. Janet said she did not care what he had and that if he interfered she would have him cited too. Then I heard the tow truck driver say something I could not make out, and Derek said he was calling the police. I told Derek to stay on the line with me and call the cops on speaker. He did. The dispatcher asked what the emergency was. Derek explained that a tow truck was attempting to remove a vehicle from a private driveway without the owner's consent, and that the HOA representative was claiming authority she did not have. The dispatcher said she would send an officer. Derek thanked her and went back outside. I could hear Janet yelling at him, saying he was trespassing on HOA business and that she would make sure he regretted it. Derek stayed calm. He said he was standing on a public sidewalk and that he had every right to film. Janet said the sidewalk was private property. Derek said it was not, and that she should wait for the police to arrive before she did something she would regret. The officer arrived about 8 minutes later. I could hear him asking for identification and asking who authorized the tow. Janet said the HOA authorized it. The officer asked to see the authorization paperwork. Janet said it was on file with the management company. The officer said he needed to see it now or the tow was illegal. Janet said she would call Linda. The officer said he would wait. I heard Janet on the phone with Linda, her voice getting higher and sharper. Then I heard her say, "Fine, forget it," and the call ended. The officer told the tow driver to release the truck. The driver complied. Janet tried to argue that the HOA had covenant authority and that the police had no jurisdiction. The officer said politely that Arkansas law requires property owner consent for towing and that HOA covenants do not override state law. He said if the HOA wanted to pursue a fine, they could do that through the proper process, but they could not tow a vehicle without a court order or a clear safety violation. Janet said this was not over. The officer said he would be happy to come back if she wanted to continue the conversation at the station. She did not. Derek stayed on the line with me until the tow truck left. He said Janet got in her car and peeled out, spinning tires on the snow. He said the officer took his statement and gave him a case number. I thanked him and told him I owed him big. He said I could pay him back by making sure this ended at the March meeting. I said I would. The next day I got an email from Lisa, the board president. She said the board had reviewed my complaint and determined that the propane tank was in fact permitted under city code and that the fines would be canceled effective immediately. She apologized for the confusion and said my gate access would be restored within 24 hours. She also said the board had voted to suspend all enforcement actions related to my property, pending a full review of the Finance Committee's procedures. It sounded like a victory, but I did not trust it. I replied and asked for written confirmation that the fines were canceled, that the lien threat was withdrawn, and that no further action would be taken. Lisa replied 2 hours later with a PDF signed by her and 2 other board members. It was official. The fines were gone. I should have been relieved, but I was not. I knew Janet was not going to let this go, and I was right. That Friday, I got a text from the HOA security office saying there had been a complaint about excessive noise from my property and that a patrol had been dispatched to investigate. I was not even home. I was in Little Rock at a data center. I called Derek and asked if he had heard anything. He said no, but he would keep an eye out. An hour later, he texted me a photo. It showed a security patrol SUV in my driveway and a guard standing on my porch with a clipboard. Derek said the guard knocked, got no answer, walked around the house looking in windows, then wrote something on the clipboard and left. 15 minutes later, I got an automated email from the management company saying a noise violation had been documented and that I would receive a follow-up notice within 3 business days. I was done playing defense. I called my city contact and asked if he could put me in touch with someone at Code Enforcement who could formally review the HOA's enforcement pattern. He said he knew someone, and he would make the introduction. 2 days later, I got a call from a code enforcement officer named Mark. I explained the whole timeline, the propane tank, the salt claim, the gate lockout, the tow attempt, the fake snow emergency, the noise complaint, and the stonewalling. Mark said it sounded like the HOA was operating outside its authority and that he would open a case file. He said the city had been getting complaints about Brookhaven for months and that the HOA had a history of overreach. He said if I could provide documentation, he would review it and determine if the city needed to intervene. I sent him everything I had: the notices, the attorney letters, the email thread, the city ordinance, Derek's photos, the police case number, the board cancellation letter and the fake noise complaint. Mark called me back 3 days later. He said the city was issuing a formal notice to the HOA requiring them to cease all enforcement actions that conflicted with city ordinances and to provide documentation for any fines or liens they had issued in the past year. He said the notice would be delivered to the management company and the board president, and that if the HOA did not comply within 30 days, the city would refer the case to the county prosecutor for possible fraud charges. He also said that based on my complaint and 2 others the city had received, code enforcement was recommending that the HOA be required to hire an independent management company and remove any board members involved in the violations. I asked if that meant Janet. Mark said he could not comment on individual board members, but that the recommendation was clear. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat down and wrote an email to every resident in the directory I had. The subject line was, City Code Enforcement Orders HOA to Stop Illegal Notices. I attached the city notice and explained that the enforcement actions against me had been found to violate state and local law, and that other residents who had received similar fines should contact code enforcement to file their own complaints. I said the March board meeting was going to be critical and that everyone should attend if they could. I hit send and waited. The replies started coming in within minutes. Most people were supportive. A few were angry that I had involved the city. One person accused me of trying to destroy the HOA. But 3 people said they had also been fined by Janet for bogus violations and that they were going to file complaints. One of them was a retired lawyer who said he had been looking for a reason to challenge the finance committee and that my email was the push he needed. He said he would be at the March meeting and he would bring his own documentation. I felt the momentum shifting. The week before the March meeting, I got a call from Lisa again. She said the board had held an emergency session and voted to place Janet on administrative leave pending an internal review. She said the city notice had forced their hand and that the insurance carrier had confirmed that if the HOA did not take corrective action, the policy would not be renewed. She said Janet had refused to step down voluntarily and had threatened to sue the board for defamation. Lisa sounded exhausted. She asked if I would be willing to attend the meeting and present my evidence in a calm, factual way. I said I would, but only if the meeting was recorded and the recording was made available to all residents. Lisa agreed. March 15th came. I drove to the clubhouse at 6:30 for the 7 o'clock meeting. The parking lot was already full. I parked on the street and walked in with Derek and my evidence folder. The meeting room was packed. I counted at least 40 residents, plus the 5 board members at the front table, plus Linda sitting off to the side with a laptop. Janet was sitting in the front row with her arms crossed and that measuring tape on the chair next to her like a prop. Lisa called the meeting to order and explained that the agenda had been revised to address the code enforcement notice and the related complaints. She said the board had received multiple resident emails and that they would hear from anyone who wanted to speak. She looked at me and nodded. I stood up and walked to the front. I started with the timeline. I explained the original propane tank notice, the city ordinance that allowed it, the escalating fines, the gate lockout, the fake snow emergency text, the tow attempt, and the noise complaint. I showed the city email, the police case number, Derek's photos, and the board's own cancellation letter. I kept my voice level and factual. I did not mention Janet by name until I got to the part about the repeated threats. Then I looked at her and said, "The finance committee lead told me that I would never get a fair hearing if I kept fighting." She said that on February 10th in the management office. She said it again on February 20th when she deactivated my gate code and told me to sell my house if I did not like the rules. And she said it a 3rd time when she tried to have my truck towed from my own driveway. Janet stood up. "That is a lie," she said. "I never threatened you. You are twisting my words because you do not want to follow the rules." I pulled out my phone. "I have it on video," I said. The room went silent. Janet's face went red. She said, "You recorded me without consent. That is illegal." "Arkansas is a one-party consent state," I said. "And I am the one party. The video is legal, and it is evidence." Lisa looked at Janet and said, "Is this true? Did you threaten him?" Janet said, "I have been on this board for years. I know what I am doing. This is a witch hunt." I walked to the front of the room and set my phone on the table. I said, I am going to play this now. Anyone who wants to hear what the Finance Committee lead actually said can stay. Anyone who does not can leave. No one left. I hit play. The video was 90 seconds long. It showed Janet at my back fence talking to Derek while I was in Michigan. Her voice was clear. She said, he thinks he can fight the board and win. He is wrong. I can make sure he never gets a fair hearing. I can make sure he pays every dime and then some. And if he keeps pushing, I will make sure his neighbors know he is the reason we have to raise dues this year. The video ended. I picked up my phone and looked at Lisa. Lisa looked at Janet. She said, you need to leave. Janet stood up and grabbed the measuring tape. She said, this is a setup. He baited me. You are all making a huge mistake. Lisa said, you threatened a resident on camera. You used your position to retaliate. You filed false complaints and you lied to the board about the documentation. We are done. Please leave now or I will call security. Janet stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out. The door slammed behind her. The room erupted. People were talking over each other, some angry, some relieved, some demanding to know what else Janet had been hiding. Lisa banged a gavel and called for order. She said the board would conduct a full audit of the Finance Committee records and that any resident who had been fined in the past year should submit their documentation for review. She said the board was also voting tonight to terminate the current management contract and hire a new company with stronger oversight. She said the meeting recording would be posted to the community website within 48 hours. Then she looked at me and said, I am sorry this happened. Thank you for not giving up. I nodded and sat down. Derek clapped me on the shoulder. The retired lawyer stood up and said he wanted to make a motion to remove Janet from the board entirely and to refer her conduct to the State Real Estate Commission for investigation. The motion passed unanimously. The meeting went on for another hour. 3 other residents came forward with their own stories about fines that did not match the covenants and fees that appeared out of nowhere. One couple said they had been charged $500 for a mailbox paint color that was approved in the original design standards. Another resident said Janet had threatened to foreclose on his house over a $15 late fee. The board took notes and promised follow-up. By the time the meeting ended, it was almost 10 and the parking lot was empty except for a few stragglers. I walked out with Derek into the cold night air. The snow had started falling again, light flakes drifting under the streetlights. Derek said, you did it. I said, the city did it. He said, no, you did it. You had the proof and you did not back down. I drove home and slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning I got an email from Mark at Code Enforcement. The city had received the HOA's compliance plan and determined that the enforcement actions were halted and the illegal notices were retracted. He said my complaint was resolved and that the case was closed. He also said that if I had any future issues I should contact his office directly. I thanked him and archived the email. 2 weeks later, the new management company took over and the board hired an independent auditor to review the Finance Committee records. The audit found that Janet had been adding unapproved line items to the budget for 3 years, including vendor kickbacks and personal reimbursements that totaled more than $12,000. The board referred the findings to the county prosecutor, and Janet resigned from the board before she could be removed. The prosecutor declined to file criminal charges but required her to repay the misappropriated funds and banned her from serving on any HOA board in Arkansas for 5 years. The insurance carrier renewed the policy. I kept the propane tank. I kept the measuring tape as a souvenir. And I kept the video, just in case. The neighborhood is quieter now. The new management company answers emails within 24 hours. The board meetings are recorded and posted online. And when I see Janet at the mailbox cluster or the grocery store, she does not say a word. She just looks away and keeps walking. I made my mother's follow-up appointments. I kept my contract. And I learned that sometimes the only way to win against people who abuse small power is to make sure everyone else can see exactly what they are doing. The receipts do not lie. and when you play them on speaker outside the clubhouse so neighbors hear it in real time, the truth does not need a lawyer. It just needs a witness and a record.